Today we're going to be looking at key ideas from Chapter 1 of the Siop model textbook. And our focus is going to be on introducing the Siop framework and understanding the diverse strengths and needs of our multilingual learners. So let's begin with an overview of our objectives for this module. By the end of the module, you should be able to list characteristics of multilingual learners that could influence their success in school. You should also be able to distinguish between content-based language instruction and sheltered language instruction. And you should be able to explain some of the research that supports the SIOP model. You'll also be able to describe the assets of multilingual learners and develop your professional vocabulary related specifically to elements of the SIOP model. Also comparing the SIOP strategies to your own teaching practices. So with that said, let's get started. All right, so we are going to begin with the term multilingual learners. It's in the title of the book, and so it's important that we talk about who exactly we're referring to. There, the term multilingual learners may be one that you're already familiar with, or you may be using other terms like ESL student or English learner in your district. Regardless, what we're talking about is students who are still developing their proficiency in English. And typically, these are students who are going to be receiving language support through programs like bilingual education, a dual lingual program, or English medium instruction classes. They take assessments to monitor their English proficiency, and they may be receiving accommodations in their content classes and on state tests. There are many different terms that are used to refer to this population. At times, I might shift between different terms simply because over the course of my career, the terminology we use to refer to this particular group of students has changed a number of times. And so sometimes I throw out a different term than what you were expecting. Um, so I really encourage you to pause the video right here and go back to page 5 in the textbook. And I want you to look at figure 1.1 on page 5. You've probably heard of a lot of the terms that show up there, but you may find some that are new to you. Here in Mississippi, the Department of Education refers to these students as English learners or ELs. So that's probably a term that you will hear me using a lot in this class, but I just wanted to get that out there. So the population that we're talking about is a population that is growing rapidly across the United States and right here in the Southeast. The largest concentrations of multilingual learners are found in states like California, Texas, New York, Illinois. And although Mississippi traditionally has had lower numbers than states like California, Texas, Florida, and New York, Mississippi's EL population is growing rapidly, as anyone who has been in a school recently can tell you. Um, the state is now serving more than 12,000 identified ELs. And so, as educators, we really need to be prepared to meet the diverse needs. In fact, I would go so far as to say the need is not just restricted to people who are interested in working in TESOL. I think every teacher in the Mississippi Public Schools really would benefit from knowing more about working with these students. The majority of the ELs across the country are found in K through fifth grade settings. That would be about 60% of all of our ELs are in grades K through 5. Spanish is the most common home language spoken by ELs. About 75% of our ELs nationwide are Spanish speakers. However, we also see growing numbers of students who speak Arabic, Chinese, Vietnamese, and hundreds of other languages. Sorry. Um, and basically, there are around 400 languages being spoken in schools across the United States. In recent years, the five most common languages spoken by ELs in Mississippi have been Spanish, Arabic, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Gujarati. We tend to see higher numbers of Vietnamese ELs closer to the coast, and we see more Arabic speakers where there are colleges and universities with international student populations. So now that we've talked about who our English learners or our multilingual learners are, we're going to take a deeper look at a really powerful concept from this chapter. The idea of funds of knowledge that our multilingual learners bring to the classroom. It is really easy, especially in policy conversations or in deficit-based narratives, to focus on what our multilingual learners lack, to talk about their need for more vocabulary, the fact that they don't have the grammar they need, the fact that maybe they don't have a strong educational background even in their L1. But in truth, these students bring a wealth of knowledge, skills, and new perspectives that can enrich not only their own learning, but the entire classroom community. First, let's consider language and cultural knowledge. Many multilingual learners have a deep familiarity with cultural norms, customs, values, and worldviews from their families, from their communities, possibly even other cultures that they had contact with in their journey to the United States, which would especially be the case for our refugee and migrant students. These cultural experiences shape how they engage with content, how they view authority, how they engage in collaboration with their peers, and how they process information. For instance, a student from a storytelling tradition may have highly developed narrative skills, even if they're still acquiring English vocabulary. Next, we have literacy skills. And many of our students will come to us with good literacy skills in their L1. Students who are literate in their first language already possess an internalized understanding of how reading works, how letters form words, how punctuation shapes meaning, how paragraphs are organized, how thought is structured. So they can take these skills and they don't have to relearn them completely from scratch. They can transfer a lot of what they know from their L1 into their learning of English. If we have strategic instruction that aims to do that, to help them do that. So now we're going to talk about metalinguistic awareness. And this is the ability to think about and analyze language, its structure, usage, meaning. Multilingual learners are constantly navigating between languages. They develop a heightened sensitivity to how languages work. They often ask questions like, why does this sentence sound right in English but not in Spanish? Or what's the difference between I have eaten and I ate? This awareness is a cognitive strength that correlates with greater academic achievement over time. But it's also a key element when we talk about age and English language acquisition. The younger the learner, the less abstract reasoning and metacognitive skill that they can bring to the task. So our younger learners are going to be learning in a way that's very different from our older learners. In addition to linguistic assets, multilingual learners bring life experiences and social emotional skills that influence their learning. Some may have experienced migration, family separation, or challenges adjusting to a new country. Experiences that build resilience, adaptability, and problem solving. Others may have served as language brokers for their families, helping to translate important documents or navigate a health system for a family member that's sick. These roles can build maturity and responsibility well beyond their peers. One of the most powerful frameworks for understanding these strengths is the concept of funds of knowledge. This is a term that was developed by Louise Moll and his colleagues, and it refers to the historically accumulated bodies of knowledge, cultural practices, and social networks that families use in their daily lives. For example, a student whose family runs a small business may have a practical understanding of economics, time management, and even negotiation. A child who helps cook meals daily may understand measurements, sequencing, and health concepts. As educators, our job is not to ignore these funds of knowledge, but to actively draw on them in our instruction. That could mean integrating a student's cultural references into examples, inviting them to share their language and traditions, or designing assignments that connect academic content to real-world family and community contexts. When we view multilingual learners through a strengths-based lens, we transform our classrooms into spaces of inclusion, affirmation, and mutual growth. And these students are not just language learners, they are rich assets who can contribute to our learning communities in a number of ways. So before we move on to the next part of this assignment, I want you to go to figure 1.3 in your text. Are there any characteristics that you hadn't thought about before reading this chapter? Did they miss any that should be included? Are there any that you don't understand? And if you are teaching outside of the United States, how do students compare to the students described in this chapter? Leave your thoughts before moving on to the next little bit of this module.